Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors, and I'm here with my co-host, Dan Robin. Dan, today we're going to talk about how to be a good student in jiu-jitsu and almost anything in life.
Right. Probably the same principles of being a good student in general largely apply to jiu-jitsu.
I think so. And I think this concept is something that somebody might gloss over when they first hear it. They may think there's not a lot of value there, but based on my experiences, I've been teaching now for 16 years. Holy cow, Dan. I just realized we started Connors Martial Arts in July of 2005.
Yeah, so that's a while ago.
Wow, 16 years. So I have some experience.
Yeah. And we talked about you as a teacher also developed your teaching.
Yeah, definitely.
During the whole time. And that not everyone thinks about that, thinks about improving their teaching. People think, I know how to teach, and I'm good at it, and they can do it forever without
I think people
evolving.
think I'm good at jiu-jitsu. They don't even think about, are they good at teaching? And, I'm so lucky that my son works and trains with me full-time. Really re-energized me, reinvigorated my passion for jiu-jitsu. And we're both looking for better methods all the time. So one of the things we did notice is that the quality of students can vary tremendously without being obnoxiously critical of people. But we can have one student who can come in and develop so much faster than some other student. And we're thinking it isn't always just natural athletic ability. Some people have a talent to learn certain subjects faster than others, right?
Right. So when you say develop more quickly, you mean not just, like some people might be like, he was just a problem very quickly because he's so strong or he's so athletic.
Correct.
That he was difficult very quickly
to
deal with. But you also, beyond that, you also see like people whose jiu-jitsu is developing very, very quickly.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Exactly. If I could distill their jiu-jitsu abilities and skill level down, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about their strength. And very often, as you can imagine, somebody who's very physically strong, their progress sometimes gets hampered because they don't need to get better. They're just so strong they can grab somebody and kind of throttle them a little bit, and they don't. And then on the other hand, when somebody doesn't have a lot of physical power, the only way they can be effective is understanding the leverage of jiu-jitsu and the techniques.
Right. And I'm sure we've heard this all along, that you hit that ceiling when you're just relying on your strength, for example.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, it doesn't work. Someone's as strong or someone's just too good.
Right.
And then it doesn't work anymore.
That's exactly what happened to me when I was a blue belt. I was pretty strong and pretty scrappy. But it got to the point where if the guy was stronger than me, then I went from being effective to completely ineffective. Like, I went down to 0. And I'm like, well, this isn't any good, And then I was forced to actually learn jiu-jitsu. And actually get
that
some
could be a
skills.
big, because that doesn't just apply for someone that's very strong, right? That can just be like, you can be medium strength and like, hey, I'm doing well against weaker or smaller people.
Right.
And then you're just going to run into that roadblock when someone's your strength. So
that brings us to the question, Dan. What separates the so-called good student of jiu-jitsu and the not so good? And I have some ideas about this. We used to have a T-shirt that I had made for the academy, and on the back it said, "I'm here to improve, not to prove." And what I've sort of noticed over the years is that a lot of guys come in and they want to prove to the instructor that, hey, I'm a pretty tough guy.
Right.
Hey, I kind of know how to fight. We've talked about this before. It's one of those skill sets that men feel like they should already know before they get any training at all. And they're a little maybe embarrassed or ashamed if they feel like they don't have that skill set. So they don't want anyone to think that they don't know how to fight, or they don't have that skill set.
Right. Or even one notch down from that, but it's like all right, I know I can't beat you experienced guys, but look, I'm still pretty tough. I'm pretty you know what I mean? Like, I'm still going to give you a hard time, and I'm going to do better than the other new students you saw that have come through this door.
Right.
And they're still trying to prove something.
Right.
You know, it's, yeah. And we're probably all guilty of it.
I think so. I was definitely guilty of that. And the problem with that is when you're busy trying to prove that, and you're not saying it, you don't even say it explicitly. You're kind of trying to apply that. And when you're busy trying to imply that, you're not busy learning the actual technique. So your brain is divided, probably, you know, in half, or there's some division of your faculties where you're trying to demonstrate that you really know what you're doing, and you're really tough, and you're really rugged, and you're not really listening, and you're not really doing the technique.
Right.
And it's a disaster, you know.
Yeah, we've seen some of the people that developed very well started either very young or very weak or very small, right? And then they just they had to learn it, like you said.
Right.
And they were probably on the right track in the first place. They didn't come in like, I'm going to show that I'm really tough, because they were like, look, they obviously were smaller or younger or something like that. And then
I noticed that even more with kickboxing. So Muay Thai, when women came in, they would be a blank slate. They'd be like, okay, tell me what to do. How do I stand? How do I hold my arms? What do you need me to do? And pretty quickly, they could throw some decent punches, and they could kick with relatively good technique. And a lot of the guys come in, you know, oh, I've watched the Clint Eastwood movie. I know how to punch, and they're not even listening to you. They're like demonstrating some weird, perverted sense of how to throw a punch. So they're not listening to you. So you have to like deprogram them in order to get through to them.
Yeah, they're just like, one time in a bar that I punched someone, I knocked someone right off the stool or something, and so I can punch, and so they throw that punch, and you're like, it's not.
Yeah,
I'm sure that worked that time in the bar, but that's not how we're doing it here.
Right. I mean, I oftentimes get frustrated, Dan, when I go to present the technique. So I put a lot of thought in what we're teaching our students. I always ask myself, why am I teaching this? Why do they need to know it? And I discuss it with my son. We come up with, like, what do we think is the best thing for the class to be working on right now? And, you know, we don't just pull it out of a hat. We're basing it on what our experience is. You know, we've had success doing competing, and I've been training for 22 years or something. And then we also look to the best people in the world, you know, the John Danaher, Gordon Ryan, Garry Tonon, Mikey Musumeci. These are the best people in the world. We're looking at what they're doing, their instructionals, and we're curating. We're like, this is what the class needs right now. So in some ways, it's absurd for somebody to not accept that and go, okay, you know better than me. You know what I mean? Sure. And then when we present the information, you've been in my class. You've been back this week. It's awesome. And, you know, we don't ramble on and on and on. We kind of get to the point. You know what I mean? Here's the technique. And there's usually, I would say, maybe 6 or 7 major portions of the technique, if it's a side control, escape, or whatever the technique is, right? So I kind of want to see the students hit all 6 of those high points that we pointed out. You know what I mean? Like, we wouldn't point it out if it wasn't something we thought was important, you know? Don't gloss over one of the points. Like, hit all the points. And like any technique, you could parse it down to 100 different details, maybe, if you went deep enough into it. But we're just taking the 6 most important fundamental ones. So, yeah, just do the 6. But, Dan, people have a resist. Not everybody, but there's some students that unconsciously resist what you're trying to teach them. You know what I mean? Where they're like, and they're not, I'm not talking about beginner white belts. I'm talking about some of the more experienced students. And they'll kind of like, you see it with the same people, consistently not quite do the technique the way you presented it.
Would you say it's more common within more experienced students? Like, they've developed their own thoughts?
I think it's more of a personality issue. So, yeah, I just think it's more glaring when it's somebody who's more experienced. It's like, you can see what I'm showing here. Why are you not doing, like a white belt? They might not do it, but they got so much going on in their head, they may just miss the piece of information, you know? So I don't know where it's more prevalent, but it's more sort of off-putting when it's a more experienced student. And you're like, I'm not asking you to change your life. Like, you don't even have to use this technique in your actual game, but just humor us and walk through it for this 5 minutes that we're doing the technique. But I think that attitude in general belies something else, where they're not being the best student that they could be. They'd be better served for themselves if they just said, that's what we're doing today. All right, let's do it. Let's just do it.
Mindset-wise, abstract-wise, be like, you're coming into the class like, I'm just going to listen and I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Instead of,
I'm going to be a blank slate.
It's easier, right? It's easier.
I think it's way easier. When I go over to train with Mark DellaGrotte at Sityodtong in Somerville, I try to go in there as a completely blank slate. Just tell me what to do today, and I'll give it my best efforts. I'm not going to parse it out. I'm not going to judge the material coming at me and say, that looks good. I'm not so crazy about that thing you're trying to tell me right now. Like, that filter isn't helpful. It seems normal, like, we all kind of do it anyways. When you're listening to whatever, I mean, most of the news today is fake anyways, but, you're getting information and you're sort of filtering the information and accepting some of it, and maybe you're not accepting some other of it. But wouldn't it be great to be in a place of learning, an academy of jiu-jitsu or wherever, where you can just say, I'm just going to accept it all as if it's very good information, and I'll worry about filtering it out later. I think if somebody can do that, they're way ahead of the game. That filtering just slows your learning down.
Right, and the best way to filter it is in practice anyway, right? Like, if it's just not working for you, for one piece of it or whatever is not working for you, you'll find that out, right? Like, as you're rolling.
But the thing is, unless you drill it the way it's presented, you don't even know. You're not giving it a fair test.
Right.
And then even then, it may take you, who knows? It might take you a couple of months of trying to implement it in a live roll before you finally really master it, before you even know if it's something that's useful to you or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even taking it back a step, would you say it's helpful to get at the beginning of class to have a mindset like, I'm going to be, however you want to put it, but we're putting it right now as a good student. I'm going to do my best here.
I'm going to be a blank slate, a good student, and a good training partner. Rory and I are doing this workout program now. It's from this guy. It's called the Knees Over Toes guy. He's getting a lot of buzz on YouTube. And he has this program where it's 12 weeks. He calls it zero. So it's basically all body weight exercises. And Rory and I completed the whole 12 weeks. And to be honest, if it wasn't for Rory, I probably wouldn't have finished it. But I kept up with him and we did it. And Dan, the workouts were the same workouts Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 12 weeks. And then there was a Tuesday, Thursday workout that was the same for 12 weeks. And it was pretty tedious after a while. Is that
why you were saying you wouldn't have finished just because you were getting sick of?
Yeah, totally. But we went into it this, like, we're going to be good students, and this guy says to do this program for 12, so we're just going to do it. And I think we were well served by doing it. Now we're on to the next part of it, which he calls dense, 12 weeks of that. And now the programs involve some weights and some more resistance, and they're way more varied so far. We're in the first week of it. We did the first week. So it's much more interesting to do. But most people, I think we're probably above average athletes, so we probably didn't need to do the first 12 weeks exactly the way it was prescribed. But it was kind of good to do it. You know what I mean? Now we're fully onto the program. We're not going to take any shortcuts.
And again, easier to just say, let's just do this program, as opposed to long discussions about which parts you could cut out, or should it be twice a week instead of 5 days, just making it.
And if you think about it, most people aren't in the position to judge what could be taken out and what can be left in, right?
Yeah.
That's like when guys say to myself, oh, this guy should be a blue belt. And and it's like, so you know better than me. I've been doing this for 22 years. You're in it for 2, and you have greater insight than me about what level somebody's at. It's a little unrealistic, isn't it?
Yeah, I see that apply more for people looking at themselves. That's what I always say for people to feel better about themselves, because, you know, there's this extremely common phenomenon of people getting offered a higher belt and being like, are you crazy? I don't deserve that.
Right.
Why am I getting that? Like, it's almost a negative experience. And the way to let that go, the best advice I've heard is just trust your instructor.
Yeah.
Like, why do you just trust them?
And guess what? And if the instructor's imperfect, they made a small mistake, so what? Live with it.
Yeah.
Right? I totally agree. It's almost right down the middle, Dan. Half think they should be promoted faster, and the other half think they're being promoted too fast. There's very few people that are like, yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Well, that's teaching. When I taught college courses, you'd have, like, you got those reviews at the end,
mm-hmm.
and it would be like, one of the questions was like, is it going at the right speed or too
mm-hmm.
fast or too slow? Almost no one said the right speed. It was half
too
too
fast
and half too slow. And then I'd be like, I guess it was about the right speed, because it seems about 50-50.
Yeah.
You know, but no one's like, this is perfect.
Of course. And of course, one speed can't be perfect for a population of people, right? That's crazy.
So, yeah, it makes sense if the belts, if like half the people think it's too fast and half think it's too slow. But also, like you said, who even cares? That's where my head is right now. Like, it's like, you got a belt a little sooner, a promotion sooner than you thought you should have. So what?
Right.
You know, or you're waiting and you're like, I thought I would have had this a couple of months ago and you didn't get this. So what?
My problem now, Dan, is I've been a black belt for so long, and I think the culture in our academy right now is the best it's ever been. It's just a lot of people who are earnestly coming onto the mat, trying to get better, and we're not looking at the belts as much. So, you know, I'm scrapping with blue belts, purple belts, brown belts, black belts, everybody. So I don't see the distinction as much, especially when we're going no-gi. I'm not go, oh, this guy's only this belt. You know, we're just, you know, this is this student of mine, this guy, you know, and I'm just training with them. So I'm definitely thinking about belts less and less and less.
Yeah.
And I think it's good in a way because we want to focus on our development. So, but I know not all academies are like that. The other thing, here's another example of not being a good student, I noticed. So there's the role of the uke. That's the person that's helping somebody drill a technique. So you must have experienced this before, Dan. Tell me if you have. The uke who, like, kind of really resist you trying to do the technique.
Yeah.
And you're trying to walk through it for the very first time. And they're just, like, tightening up a certain way or leaning all their weight a certain way. And you're like, yeah,
what are you doing?
I'm just trying to drill it, dude.
It happened to me this week. Everyone's been good. But in the past, it's happened to me.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, what are you doing? Like, I have to.
It's some weird hostility, right? Some passive aggressiveness.
I've even seen people do it to an instructor when they're trying to show the class. And luckily you guys are good enough to be like, all right, like, you still get it done.
Yeah.
But I think I've seen you do it. And all the instructors have to, like, do a little extra to get the thing done because the person's maybe almost trying to show off a little that they can stop you or something like this.
Yeah.
And
they're flexing a little bit. Right?
Or sometimes you have to, or they'll, like, block what you're doing. You have to be like, okay, if they did that, then I would do this. Like, you know what I mean? But you're like,
exactly.
But can we just not do that? Right?
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar to you? Or you're showing
very familiar. Yeah. Yeah. you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what can go down sometimes. And they're not being a good student. They are flexing. They're kind of trying to steal a little status somehow in the moment. And it's like, dude, stop doing that. Then on the other extreme, you get people who just become like a limp rag doll, like a crash test dummy, or they just fall over.
Yeah.
Like, you think he's going to experience that next time he's grappling somebody? They're just going to fall over limp.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they're also, we should say, you can err on one side by accident, one side or the other. You can be like a little too tight or a little too loose.
Right. You should be earnestly trying to give a good look. You don't have to be perfect.
Right.
But I do notice that some people sort of unconsciously are sabotaging their training partner for some godforsaken reason. That's not being a good student,
right?
You know.
Does that same thing applies to some roles? Like, I've complained before when someone is like a fairly competitive role with me, and they sort of insultingly like, okay, go ahead, like, let them, like, they let me pass, and I'm like, why are you like? there's like this insult implied, like,
Right.
like, okay, like suddenly I feel them go like real, like you can just pass, you know, and I'm sort of like, are you insulting me? Like, why do you think you're someone that can just let me pass? Like, we're pretty competitive.
Well, they're
like,
being dishonest. They don't want to put the effort into stopping you from passing, but they don't want to concede that they can't stop you from passing. So they're creating this other fantasy that they let you do it. Yeah, that's not being a good student either. That's obnoxious. Yeah. Just give your best effort. Be honest about what you're doing. And don't worry about the results. Just try to develop yourself. So here's another example. I think it's good to go over what's not a good student, probably, Dan, right? Help us narrow in, because it's a subjective thing. Here's another thing. You really shouldn't be trying to please your instructor. You know the old cliche, the kid brings an apple to the teacher?
Right.
It's this a little bit of a bribe, right?
I knew I shouldn't have brought you that apple. Is that what this is about?
I don't like Granny Smiths.
Okay. Got it. I hear what
Strictly
you're
a Macintosh guy.
I've been pretty good about not being.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're usually not bringing you an apple, but
it's a metaphor.
Yeah. It's a subtle thing that happens where the student can want the approval of the instructor. It's perfectly natural. And then the trap is sometimes these instructors want the adulation of their students. They want their students to adore them. And it's just
so
not
they feed
healthy.
into it, yeah.
It gets fed into. And then the student is looking to the instructor. How am I doing? Am I doing okay? You know, you want technical feedback from your instructor, but you really don't want too much approval. You don't want to be leaning into that. Like, maybe if you really respect them, you want their respect, but, you know, you got to be careful with that.
I've seen it where I'm rolling with someone and they see you're looking and suddenly they're murdering me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, suddenly everything's 10 times as hard, and I'm like, you don't have to show off in front of John. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I'll have some people tell me, yeah, I was rolling with so-and-so. I saw you looking over at me, and I was pissed off because I just let my guard down for a second, and I was like, wait, what? I go, no, I was like thinking about I have to take the laundry tomorrow to the laundromat. Yeah, I just happened to be staring in that direction. I didn't even know what the hell happened.
Yeah, people are, and I'm not innocent of it either. Like, you're hyper attuned. Like, I think everyone's experienced this where it's like, you know, like in the middle of a roll, you'll be like, move your head. And you're like, oh, should I move my, and then I notice you're talking to someone else. And I'm like following the advice that you're not even giving to me.
Right.
Or there was one actually this week where you're like, I forgot, you said something like, maybe you should move your head. And all you meant was like, we were going off the mat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, move my head? Is it like in the wrong position? And like for just a second, you know, and then I'm like, oh, now I see what he means. So it's human nature to be tuned into you and to listening to you. It makes sense.
You're getting good technical feedback, but you don't want to lean too much into the getting approval, I think, from your instructor and esteem from them. A little bit. It's natural to get a little bit. You know, whenever I compete and do well, I might text to a handful of people that I respect, that I know, and I'll share the victory with them, something like this. But I don't want to lean into trying to impress every person on the internet, every Facebook friend or something, you know. I think that's not probably where you want to go, right?
Yeah. And again, it's natural. So it's not, sometimes it sounds like we're criticizing anyone who does any of these things, but I think
we're the most socially sensitive animals by far on the planet.
As always, it's worth, I've heard sometimes we give some sort of podcast like this and people think it's like criticizing all these things, like you're angry at people that do this, but it's actually saying a lot of it's human nature, and
I think it's all human nature.
Point it out to be like,
yeah, and I've been guilty of all of it at some point, and I'm trying to become a better student, and I'm just noticing that there is a variety of students, and some are thriving better than others, and I think it has to do with this approach that we're talking about, this kind of mindset, if you will.
And I think a related mindset, but I've been trying and succeeding so far this week. I was really good about just not processing at all what anyone else thinks about how my jiu-jitsu is, or how, you know what I mean? So I was gone for a while. I just came back, and it's like, I'm rusty. I'm not, there's a step behind, and I'm just so far succeeding, like just not caring if anyone is like, oh, he got worse or he didn't get worse, or, you know, in either direction.
That's very good.
You know, even sort of like, oh, you're doing great. I'm not really trying to, I'm like, thanks, but I'm not really trying to focus on that. Or saying,
you don't want to lean into either
or like
one of those.
now he thinks now he's better than me now, and I used to be better than him, and all. I just don't care. I'm not concerned about any of it.
I think that's good.
And I'm sort of almost just think it's almost. I almost feel glad, like I'm lucky, like that for some reason my brain's not going that way, because it can be hard to stop it if you're feeling that way. And you know, it's hard to just consciously turn that off.
I give credit to this podcast. You've probably listened to every episode since you've been sitting here.
There's a lot of wisdom. Yeah. Well, we've talked about it. Seems to be it worked on me. I don't know about anyone else, but I feel like it's actually worked. Like I'm sort of like I don't really care what anyone. I was telling you earlier today that I couldn't remember, like for certain roles, like if someone tapped me or not. You know what I mean? And
that's a great sign, I think.
Yeah, I don't care, or if I tap someone else, I just don't remember. I don't care. And then there's all these intermediate levels of what does it mean that you tap someone, like in a drill, maybe you tap someone, or someone's going light and you tap someone, or you restart a position and you tap. So I'm just not even remembering taps.
Think of all the mental energy you save not having to parse out the meaning of all those different scenarios.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's just like, who cares?
And you can just focus on getting better. Yeah.
Also, similar to you in this exercise program, I'm just trying to come in all the time, because I think I used to do too much of like, I'll do Monday, Thursday, Saturday, but not next Saturday. So then I'll do Monday, Wednesday. Like I'm trying to just come in all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then I'll have to miss some days.
That's a really good point, Dan. Yeah. If you think I only want to go in there when I'm fresh because I want to look good, pretty soon you're never coming at all, right? Yeah, that's a bit of a trap, I think. You know, when we were back in Dedham, I toyed around with this match of the day thing. I saw it on BJ Penn's website back then. He had a website. This was prior to social media, probably 2005 or 6 or 7, and he would have a camera on his gym, and at the end of class, he'd call 2 guys out, and they'd get out in front, and they would have this intense match that they would score and whatever. Some guy would win. And at my academy, I'm like, oh, I'm going to start doing that. Really bad idea.
Did you start?
I did it for a short term, and then I realized people do not like this. People stopped coming to class because their thinking was, oh, I'm really tired from work today. If I go into class and get called out, that'll be embarrassing. And then I think when they came to class, they were kind of reserving their energy in case they got called at the end of class.
Right.
So I just stopped.
There's
entirely.
Probably 10 other things too.
It wasn't
or just
productive.
Like horrified of like, I hate. Everyone thinks I'm better than him, but if we get called out, I bet he'll beat me. And you know, like
yeah, I had a bad story. I won't go into it too much, but a guy was training with a young teenager for the match of the day, and they were good friends. And he was kind of just being playful with the guy and let the guy not crush the guy. And then all of a sudden the time ended and the little teenager won. And then the guy, I saw he had a weird look on his face, and he basically quit not long after that. So I was like, this isn't helpful. I got to take this off the table.
I was interested to hear, and I've heard it from multiple levels and multiple personalities of people, that they said they get anxiety driving to the gym.
Yeah, I heard people say that. Yeah,
and I never got anxiety, like for all the different. And you know, I'm always have this.
Dan, I think
this mental issue or that mental issue or beating myself up, but I never got anxiety driving to the gym.
I did. Yeah, I remember they would have Saturday morning open mats back in 1999, 2000 at Boston Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Watertown, and I remember getting up. I wouldn't say it was anxiety, but I had like sweaty palms, like anticipation, like it was good anxiety. Like I thought I was going to a tournament and I was going to win a gold medal or something. Yeah. And you just go, you match up, and you just tear into each other. It was fun. Probably not the most productive use of my time,
right.
But yeah, I'd have sweaty palms. I think it took me 35 minutes to drive from Hyde Park to Watertown. And it was great. I loved it. Yeah.
But you don't really need, for your classes you're teaching now, you really shouldn't be having anxiety, right?
Well, everybody's different. Yeah, everyone's born with a different personality, a different nervous system. So I acknowledge that. And some people are cool as a cucumber, and other people are super nervous. Some guys, Dan, they've been doing it for a while, and they still have a sheen of sweat on their face just coming onto the mat. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But they can work on it, you know?
Yeah, but I also do, too, like, I would say, like, if I feel like, if it's like you match up with this person, it's someone that, like, I don't really want to match up with, and I feel that pang of, like, oh no, or anxiety, I really try to focus on getting rid of it. You know what I mean?
I think it's good.
Just like,
I think the more you can go into
just
that,
breathe a little and be like, it doesn't matter, and talk yourself down. I've always been able to do it pretty quick.
I think if you can embrace that, it's so powerful. When I was preparing for my last match, I wanted to get a lot of work in defending the back control, and I would basically try to find the most difficult students every day. You know, Tyler King, get on my back. You know, Dan Kennedy's really good, big strong guy, get on my back. I would just try to pick the worst people. When I could have picked anybody, I'm the instructor. I could pick anybody, and the way I judged it was like, how did I feel about it? Which felt in my gut like the one I didn't want to do. That's the one I have to do. Yeah. And then it's good medicine. Like pretty quickly you get over it.
But yeah, it also seems though that's like for preparing for a tournament, because so slightly different angle, that I used to do that kind of thing for not for preparation, but like I just didn't like ever feeling nervous. So if it was like I actually did that just for open mat or at the end of class.
Oh, I see.
When I was like, this person is someone I don't want to roll with. And for me, it wouldn't be the toughest guys. I think I told you before, if someone's way ahead of me, they don't make me nervous at all. Because I'm like, well, I have nothing to lose here, you know. But the people that I didn't like, you know, like I was saying, like maybe.
I think it's the person that's nipping at your heels on the status ladder and the hierarchy of esteem. That you're a new purple belt and they're a really good blue belt and they're younger than you. That's shit. And you're kind of established as being above them, at least in your mind. Yeah. That's the toughest person to go with.
And you sort of think they're probably going to beat me, even though maybe other people think that I could beat them, or, you know, something like that. But I used to do, like during the open period, if I felt like I dropped my eye contact from someone when they're looking around when we used to do it with like looking around, like who do you want to roll with? And if I ever like avoided it, I'd be like, that's bad. And I'd walk over like the next roll, I'd be like, hey, do you want to go? Like with the person I did not want to go with.
Yeah.
So I understand that. Now I'm actually feeling totally different than that. If that makes sense. Now I'm like, I don't care about any of that at all. So you know what I mean? If that makes sense. Like now I'm like, I don't.
It's a distraction. It really is.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't care who I go with, or I'm not going to call anyone out. I'm not going to feel bad myself.
And for the most part, I sort of try to partner people up as the instructor of the class. Sometimes people will gravitate toward each other, and if I think it's a reasonable matchup, I'll let them do it. But, you know, I have to look at the whole group. So sometimes the matchups are going to be less than perfect, but it's like, hey, this guy's 300 pounds. You're 220. I know your buddy's 200 pounds, and you want to train with him, but you're the biggest guy. You got to go with the 300-pound guy. You got to help me out here. Yeah. And, you know, that's a simplistic example, but things like that happen. And I'm trying to create the best experience, so give the person the best training partner for both of them to develop. So I'm trying to partner everyone up so the group as a whole can develop as much as possible. Yeah.
But what don't you think? So I've always told you that I always felt part of it was I'd roll with anyone. I think most people feel the same way. It's not just me. There's something to sometimes rolling with a 300-pound guy. Like, let me feel what that feels like, and you know what I mean. Like, so
right.
I don't want to every day. Like if it was like 5 days in a row I'm with a 300-pound guy, I'd be like, John, you're killing me. You know, like I'm getting flattened.
I think so, but it really depends where the student is in their development. If they're a white belt and they don't really know how to get out of side control the most effective way, then it's not going to be useful for them to be in the bottom of a 300-pound guy and just flail around until they get out, I don't think. I'd rather have them just learn the technique and then wow, you're pretty good at this. Now let's stress test what you're doing. Yeah. Let's challenge you. See if you can get out of this guy now. Yeah. I think that's probably the way to approach things. The other thing I noticed about some students, Dan, is that whole here to prove, not to improve. Sometimes when I give people information, they resist it. They try to defend themselves. They're like, oh, what I was really doing there was I was doing blah, blah, blah. And sometimes it's perfectly legitimate. They go, I was just trying this new funky choke where I fall underneath the guy. And I'm like, oh, yeah, great. But other times, they're just clearly making a mistake, a habitual mistake that they always make. And a simple adjustment, they could improve their results. But because of some sense of insecurity, they don't want to take the information from me. And they got to explain away. And so they're like, here I am giving them a gift of like, here's something that could be useful to you. They're like, no. Let me explain why I don't need that. Yeah. It's like, it's actually good for you and it's a gift for you. But, they have some sense that if they take some feedback from me or instruction, they're going to feel worse about themselves, like they're losing esteem somehow. And that's a problem. That person's going to learn much more slowly than somebody who's not doing that,
Do you think there's some students, I had some from back in the day where they're just bizarrely slow at learning. That like, what I mean is like, I think you've had examples too where you're like, put your left hand on the hip and you're like, that's your right hand on their shoulder. Like they're just like completely difficult.
Dan, I've come to think that I think I'm even going to stop using left and right because like 50% of the population out there, if you say take your left hand, they take their right hand. It's
that common.
It's that common. It's unbelievable. And my son and I were discussing it, and so now we're trying to come up with different phrases. So it's like, the arm away from the mat, or you know what I mean. Yeah. We're trying to use other things to orientate other than left to right. The arm near their head is going to do this. The arm near their leg is going to do that.
I didn't realize the left-right was a big issue.
It's a big deal. I don't know what's going on there. I'm sure some neurologists can tell us that left to right gets processed in a different part of the brain than athletic movement maybe or something. Maybe it's too abstract. I don't know. But it's so common that when it's at least 50-50. If I tell somebody left, it's 50-50 that they're going to move their left limb or whatever. Yeah.
I remember once from many years ago, one of my training partners was being coached, and it was for a takedown, and it was like, don't duck your head because you could be guillotined, right? Like and so he's like, okay, and would just duck his head. The coach was like, no, don't duck your head. And he was like, okay, he ducked his head, and it became this comical scene of like, no, don't, and then him coming in for the takedown, and the coach like trying to hold his head, like.
Yeah, force it
up.
And
the guy, and he couldn't even, he forced it back down. And it was just like, I don't know what is going on here. It's like, it's almost like nerves or something, like nerves about being, you think it's nerves about being watched. And
yes.
Yeah. I think some people respond really badly to that, where they're just like.
They do. I try to tell people when they're learning a new technique and you're just walking through the steps, what I found to be effective for me is I try to put myself into almost a drowsy state where I'm about to fall asleep. And then I just use enough muscular energy to move my limbs the way I need to move them. I find you end up doing the technique correctly much faster that way. Because so what normally happens is nervousness causes like the neck to stiffen, maybe the upper back to stiffen, some other things, so then they're like a robot. They can't even move their body properly.
And your brain can shut down too, because I mean, I don't get this nervous, but it's the example from outside jiu-jitsu would be like from back in the day, like college class, high school class, where it'd be like, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. And there are some people that would just be like, it's like a panicky, it's getting closer, and I have to talk
like
in
the
front
Jaws
of my peers.
theme is going on in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And it's just like, just say your name and your major and what you're interested in and what you did this summer, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that literally some people could get to them and they're like,
they just pass out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, my name is, this summer I don't know what I did this summer, and it's like, wow.
I was one of those type of people, Dan.
Really?
A little bit. Yeah, I can remember that. And just as it's coming around, you're like, oh, here it comes. I'll be fine. Oh, it's coming closer. And you're just like, the tension mounts.
John Connors. I got the name.
Dan, I read this book many years ago. It's called The Tools. Okay. And it was written by a guy, I think his name was Phil Stutz. Did I ever tell you about this guy? So this guy he's probably in his 80s now. I think it was written maybe in 2000, maybe early 2000s. I don't know. He was a psychotherapist kind of out of New York. I think he was this guy born in Brooklyn, like Jewish guy from Brooklyn, and he went into psychotherapy. I imagine a lot of psychotherapists were Jewish, right? It seemed like a little bit of a tradition,
Back
right?
in the day,
Yeah. And this guy's a very interesting guy. And what he found was he wasn't getting any results with his patients. And then he would go to his mentor and he'd say, I've been talking to this guy for 2 years and nothing's getting any better. What the hell should I do? And his mentor would go, well, nothing. You're just there. Let him talk. Like there was some school of thought in the psychotherapy where you just sit there and go, interesting. And you don't do anything, right?
Yeah, it seems like a pretty good gig.
Yeah, it was kind of like a joke. Wasn't it like Woody Allen and these guys like that would go to psychotherapists for like 40 years, right?
Yeah, it's
like,
still happening, right?
What the hell is going on? So he invented some techniques to help his patients. And he happened to have some sort of Hollywood characters as patients. So there's an actor, his name is Ron Perlman. Familiar with him?
Yep. The Beast from Beauty and the Beast.
Right.
And
Sons of Anarchy?
Yeah. And
Hellboy.
Hellboy.
I liked Hellboy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was great in that. He's got a great voice.
Yeah.
I think he does some of the voiceovers for the UFC now, some of the promos.
Oh,
He's got this magnificent voice, right? Unbelievable. Yeah. So he was one of his patients. And the other guy was Chaz Palminteri. What is that one? The Bronx Tale.
Now you can't leave.
Now you can't leave.
Yeah.
Love that scene.
Yeah.
That's the best scene ever, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pretty good movie too, right?
I barely remember it. I think so.
So at any rate, these guys would get nervous sometimes in auditions or performances. And so this guy came up with a technique, if you will, or tactic that they could use to help them. And I believe so there's 5 tools that you read about in this book. This one I believe is called the shadow. So here's the premise, Dan, and I think it has a lot of value. He said the problem, like, let's say you have to give a speech in front of 300 people and you're getting nervous, or like that they're coming around and you got to say your name and say some little thing about yourself and you're like getting horrified. It makes no rational sense that would be horrific to you, right? You're in no danger at all, but you feel like you're going to die, or some people do, right? So his theory was that we have this shadow version of ourselves, this conception of ourselves that's the worst possible version of ourselves. So like the shortest, fattest, pimpliest, most unkempt, foul-smelling, ill-spoken, fumbling, bumbling, stupid version of ourselves. And we have that. And we think the audience can see that thing. So we take that thing when we're, they're coming around, we're about to talk, and they're going to see our shadow. So we're spending all this energy hiding it behind ourselves. And, 90% of our computational faculties, our brain is like focused on them not seeing this. Then when it gets around to us, we get 10% of our brain power left. We can barely speak. And then and then it's a negative feedback loop, because then you start stammering and you're like, so they're seeing it because I'm stammering, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So the technique was you take like a hologram of that worst conception of yourself that you have, that you've created, not what somebody else has, and you put it front and center, and you don't hide it, and you tell the audience in your mind, here's the worst, disgusting version of myself. Behold, look at it, take it in. I don't care. And now you don't have to worry about it anymore. Now you can just focus on interacting with the audience or giving your presentation or whatever. What do you think?
Well, what I'm thinking is about jiu-jitsu. So on the mat is this idea like John's going to see my shadow self, which I guess in this case is like the shittiest jiu-jitsu player in the history of the world. Like I'm the worst one in the class. Filthy. I'm the worst one in the world. I'm going to do everything wrong.
Right.
And you're saying just put that forward. Like, yeah, all right.
But I'm not going to hide that.
Yeah.
That's out there. We all know about it, but now let's just get to work. I actually used that technique once, and it was very effective. This was a while ago, I had to give her purple belt out. I gave it to Amanda McQuade, and she was the first woman that I had given a purple belt to. So when I was thinking about it, I was getting a little emotional about it. It's like, that's kind of a big deal, right? And I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't want to get... There's nothing worse than a man getting overly emotional, Dan. I might be old-fashioned, but...
I'm old-fashioned.
Some guy resigns from baseball and starts blubbering. I mean, I don't want to see... Do you want to see that? Nobody wants to see that, right? It's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, I'd support someone, but I think I'd be like, what are you doing?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Let's get it together.
Yeah, I'm not going to damn them forever, but I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
You know, nobody wants to see that.
Let's get it together.
Yeah. So you don't want to get overly emotional, right? But on the other hand, you don't want to be devoid of emotion and just be like this cold-blooded, yeah, here's your purple belt. I don't care. I mean, that's crazy.
Right.
You want to have the appropriate amount of emotion, but you want to be in control of your of the presentation. And the presentation.
Did you feel similarly giving me my purple belt? I don't remember.
Oddly enough, I had no emotion at all.
Yeah, I don't remember you getting blubbery. What is that about? Where was the tears for my purple belt?
Well, I had mastered the shadow technique by that point. Okay. So then I was well in control of it. Yeah.
So you used it actually.
I actually used it, and it worked. I thought I was appropriate. I thought I had... I don't think I was overly emotional, but I wasn't devoid of emotion, and I think it was well done,
And what are you picturing for that shadowy? Is it all those bad things, or are you like, is it specific? Do you go like, here's blubbery, overly emotional me, or do you just be like, here's hideous me? Like
hideous me, yeah, that's the one I use. Yeah, hideous, incoherent, stupid me. Yeah, and it worked. Yeah. But that's a great book if anybody's interested. It's not that long of a book. Some interesting stories, and yeah, he had a podcast for a while too, and it was worth listening to. Good guys. Yeah.
What's the name again?
The book is called The Tools. I think his name is Phil. I think it's Stutz, S-T-U-T-Z. It could be Lutz though, L-U-T-Z. I don't know, something like that.
I can see it for jiu-jitsu, just sort of being like, all right, let's just like. The image in my head being like, all right, everyone thinks you're the worst. You're this, put that out there. Like everyone can see that image of you as the worst jiu-jitsu.
Once you don't have to protect that image,
it
just like, frees up so much mental energy, and you can just think more clearly and just focus on what you need to focus on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. Yeah, so that's it. I think so. People come to class for a lot of different reasons. So we talked about this before. Some people come to win, right? Mm-hmm. Some go, well, I'm just going to come and have a good time or get in shape or have fun or to socialize. And I'm at the point now where I think if you come with the principle, with a priority of developing your jiu-jitsu, everything else is going to take care of itself. You're going to get in shape.
I thought that was a great point you made earlier, that the other things are going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
So you don't have to focus on them.
Right. And if you come and do not try to protect your image of a jiu-jitsu player, you're going to get better much faster. And your image is just going to improve because you'll actually be better, But so I guess here's the thing. I don't know if this makes sense, Dan. I'm thinking if somebody can say to themselves, I want to be a better jiu-jitsu student. So it's kind of a meta thing. Like you could say, as my goal, I want to get better at jiu-jitsu. But if you said, as my goal, I want to be a better jiu-jitsu student, I think that's foundational to becoming better, faster at jiu-jitsu. Like don't skip that step about being a good student, Try to do that first. And then your performance will improve faster once you've mastered being a good student. I think I heard, what's the guy's name? Brian Glick. He's John Danaher's first black belt or second, like two guys got it the same day. And he talked about people would often come to the blue basement in New York where Danaher had teaching these classes of like 100 people. And people would come into town and they would come and they'd want his attention. They're coming to the Mecca and they want recognition from the man, which is, of course, absurd. They're not going to get it because first there's 100 people in the room doing jiu-jitsu. What are you going to do that he hasn't seen before that's so spectacular anyways, And it's just completely misguided. So now you're not focusing on developing yourself. You're focusing on getting this attention. And Glick was making this point, like you first have to become a good student before you can really get good at jiu-jitsu. So I guess that's the point of our podcast. And today, this episode, and it applies to anything. If you become a great student of something, then you're going to improve at it.
You're just asking yourself, am I being a good student? Because I haven't. I don't think.
Well, I didn't want to say that, but something to that, Dan. Yeah. I'm a better student today than I've ever been, and I'm hopefully getting better, definitely. Yeah. So that's about all I got. What do you think?
Sounds good.
I think it was a pretty strong episode, right?
Good point.
So please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Dan, we were at 690. Now we're at 689. Somebody must have
unsubscribed.
It happens. People unsubscribe, but they don't realize the pain and anguish that causes me when I see that number go down one. I'm like, God damn it. What happened there? They should have to send you an email explaining why they unsubscribe. Is it that intrusive to subscribe to my channel? I don't think they even get notifications. I think nothing happens.
They must be angry at you.
Probably. Yeah.
You know what it is? They saw the shadow you and were just repulsed.
I was trying to hide that. So please subscribe, share it, tell your friends to listen to it, and we'll see you next week.